everybody, to another episode of the Nonprofit Show. Two things. Start of Q2, big day. But Cody Bender, I got to say, you're a warrior for coming on the April Fool's edition.
Yeah, I'm just happy that the invitation was real and that I showed up. I showed up and you were here. So that was step one.
You know, really, I always feel bad for the poor sod that has to come on April Fool's because it's like the worst. It's like super fun, but it's super bad. And normally I'll just man up. We normally have somebody from YPTC that comes on, your part-time controller, that talks about fraud against nonprofits because it's a real thing. And so this year I was like, I just can't do it. We got to get somebody else because it's just like, it's too close to the bone. But anyway, Cody Bender, you know, you got to love him because he came on, like I said, April Fool's, but this is no joke. Mastering nonprofit board meetings. This is a big topic. We could be having this conversation for the next 4 hours today, but Cody's going to give us his best and brightest points for the next 30 minutes. You know, the best and the brightest of our industry supports us daily, and that includes Bloomerang, American Nonprofit Academy, Staffing Boutique, JMT Consulting, Interim Executives Academy. Oh, that's a new name, but a familiar look. Third Sector Company, our partners over there are going through a rebranding and a name change. Interim Executives Academy. You're going to be hearing more and more about them. Your Part-Time Controller and Fundraisers Friday. Again, I'm Julia C. Patrick, CEO of the American Nonprofit Academy, and I have this amazing group of co-hosts that come from all over the country. I'm flying solo today with our guest, Cody Bender, Chief Product Officer of Boardable. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I promise I will keep everything as factual as humanly possible. No jokes, no tricks. Just straight to the facts.
You know, I think everybody's walking a little on glass right now, eggshells, whatever you want to call it. So that's probably a good idea to be towing the line.
I agree.
Yeah. So before we get into this, Boardable is one of my all-time favorite products. I've just got to say, if I had been able to use this in board service, especially when I entered into board service 30 years ago, my life and the organizations I served would be a lot better. So talk to us about your platform and kind of what it involves, because it's absolutely fascinating.
So first off, thank you for the kind words. It warms our hearts. That's what we're looking for. That's why we get up in the morning. It's why we work on Boardable. It's why we are constantly innovating. But you know, Boardable is board management software, and that sounds a little dry. It sounds a little boring, but the reality is it's specifically for nonprofits. So that's who we're thinking about day in, day out, the challenges of how do you run successful meetings, right? So how do you get prepared? How do you optimize in those high leverage situations? You don't get that many chances. How do you keep track of what's being decided? How do you store your documents? How do you communicate as a team, right? When you really think about that. And we kind of meld a little bit of, you know, the mission focused ethos that comes with nonprofits, the people who are there, the volunteers, the reasons why they're there, with some of the best practices you're going to get into from a for-profit organization, right? We want to learn what is transferable and what isn't. And it really is all born out of real need, right? Our founder, the idea for this application, for this product, came from those frustrations that everybody that's watching this feels. And so the genesis of it was very pure. It was very much like, I just want to solve this problem. And today that hasn't really changed. We are still very customer centric. We listen to customers. It's where a lot of the discussion today is going to spring from. These are things I hear all the time. Can you help us with this? This is hard. We're struggling with this. And so just want to share it at large. It does feel better. I think misery loves company a little bit. It does feel better when you know that everybody else has these same issues, and we do our best at Boardable to try and help solve those.
Mm-hmm. You know, it's so interesting. I feel like you're one of those companies that was born of a good idea, but then you kind of got pitched forward at this rate of craziness because of the pandemic, because all these organizations had to be meeting and leading, and there were really no solutions. And then all of a sudden there's this new company. And, I just feel like it's a really interesting time in management, social management, for you all to be out there and to see how you've grown and changed, and refined your product is fascinating to me. But I want to get on. I mean, you're not, I'm not getting paid for this. I
Sure.
want everyone to know that this is like my legit feelings. So I want to start with the power of a well-crafted meeting agenda, because man, we've all been in meetings where, even though the mission is so important and we believe in the work, if the meeting is not well done, it's a deal breaker for me,
Sure.
at least.
For most people it is. And one of the things I want to say is, it is easier than you think. It's so daunting to get started. It's so like you think, oh, how do I start with an agenda? I have to think of the whole thing. You really don't. It's really, how do you structure it from moment 1 to moment 2 to moment 3? And your goals really help you in every meeting. What am I trying to accomplish? Make sure you've got an agenda item that's going to set you up for that. The other thing I would say about an agenda, before you even get into like, how are you using it? Collaborators, it can be a huge tool, and we allow this, which is multiple people working on an agenda helps to align your most important allies within a meeting, right? So use that tool to come into it feeling very confident. These are the things we want to talk about. These are aligned with our goals. These 3 other people who've been working on it with me are there with me. You're 80% of the way, and you're about to get the benefits of having an agenda in the meeting.
I have to say, that's nothing. I wouldn't have gone there. I wouldn't have thought of that. I mean, I know a lot of times, well-run organizations get that agenda out early, and that is there's a period of time, maybe, 24, 48 hours, whatever, where you have the opportunity to add to it or at least review it. But I like your intention there. I think that's really smart. And especially given how busy we are, to make sure that we're going to get things covered. Because, I don't know about you, but it seems to me like more and more nonprofit boards are shrinking the number of meetings that they're having.
Absolutely. I mean, because it is a time, there's a time consumption that goes with preparing for it, for getting everyone to be there at the same time. It feels like somehow just people in general are busier, more like there's a little franticness to society where it's hard to get the overlap where you can get people in the same room. So you're right. Every minute really counts. And so if you're going to get in there, I think this is sort of the second thing I would say about agendas is it's all about setting expectations. Here's what we're coming to talk about. And I think for new members, especially, it can be a little daunting. You're walking in the door. These people have been meeting without you. And just the sense that, oh, this is how it's going to be. This is what we're going to talk about. Put them at ease. And if you have a shared agenda, you're going to be able to align and bring people into the conversation because they've had time to think about it. You said it, 24 to 48 hours just to marinate on the things that they saw on the agenda. So we think it's critically important. It's a big piece of what we do. I do have a little bit of a bonus tip on this one, which is don't let form override function. And this is something, speaking of the pandemic, like I went down a rabbit hole on like good slide design and things like that during the pandemic. I was really thinking about like what makes great presentations. The same things apply to the agenda, which is too much going on the page distracts you from the content. And so let the content be the star of the show. Spend time on the agenda, but don't get worried about, oh, I need to make it red and black alternating, or I need to have all of the information has to be in this tabular format. Clean, clear, concise, ordered. Those are your outcomes. That's what you're looking for. And that will serve you better than any Word document template that you've been hanging on to for 10 years. Those things, they're nice and they're familiar, but if you really boiled it down, you could take most of that stuff off the page. And I would venture a guess, it'll be a little more readable and a little more consumable.
Yeah, I agree. I think that we just are swamped, especially in the board meeting situation where we're trying to cram down, a month or a quarter's worth of work and into, an after at the end of the day meeting where everybody's kind of tired and cranky anyway.
100%.
Right. I mean, so yeah. So let's move on to talking about the role of record keeping. I mentioned this to you in the green room. You know, the litigious nature of the nonprofit sector. We used to think we were immune from this,
Yeah.
and that we wouldn't have issues, that we would need to kind of go back and prove our fiduciary roles or our actions or voting, things of that nature. So talk about this nature that we need to really be thoughtful about.
Yeah, you really have to be prepared for it. And I think one rule of thumb is the more energy it requires, the harder it's going to be to do. And so try and find ways to really reduce the overhead, the cognitive load that you're going to introduce to get your record keeping where it needs to be. So I highly suggest that if you are looking at transcription or recording, if you really are trying to sort of inoculate yourself against, lawsuits, right?
Sure.
I would say that's a great place to start, right? I think having an agenda that is part of the record of the meeting, right? Don't just be reusing a Word doc over and over and over.
Yeah.
Have something that's part of a meeting. Have a record of everything that's done in that meeting. I think there's a flip side to record keeping as well, which is very much around accountability. What did we decide? So you mentioned voting, but what did we say people were going to do in the room? And I think that's where frequently, if tasks are created, it's also great to keep most of that as part of the meeting record. If you're keeping it in a separate like task management system, which is actually really productive, the problem is if you switch, if you get to the latest and greatest, if you start to, move around or you lose somebody that had access to it, you're going to lose track of a lot of things that people went and did and maybe some outcomes there. So I would suggest find a way to lower the overhead, but to be a little more rigorous in your record keeping and organize those records effectively, because you can keep the greatest records in the world. If you can't get to them and you can't find them, man, you're really in no better position than if you didn't do it at all.
Right. So this makes me think of a question I had for you.
Sure.
And that is a kind of in alignment with this. What are your thoughts on what are your thoughts on a consent agenda? Because it seems to me that in a consent agenda, a lot of those tasks or commitments, whatever you want to call them, from board members could be inserted there. Do you see that as a part of accountability?
Sure. I mean, I think that the method, like, so if a consent agenda is a method that your board and your organization feels like is going to be advantageous to track those, I would definitely say go for it, right?
Mm-hmm.
I also think you have to look at outcomes, and picking something is only as good as the set of outcomes that you start to get. So if you choose that route and it works for you and you're really storing it alongside the rest of the meeting data, great. If you try that and find that it's not actually very useful in real world context, because for whatever reason your members don't see it or they don't go back to it or there's no reminders triggered off of it, then I would suggest maybe look for an alternative. But I think you should look until you find something that works for you. Don't settle. I mean, that's actually one of my tips is do not settle. Settling is the fastest way to get mediocrity and to leave yourself exposed.
Yeah, I think that's very wise. That's incredibly wise. And I appreciate you bringing that up, because I think sometimes we can settle, and sometimes those consent agendas, they kind of are a way. I don't want to use the word bury, but they kind of get us off the hook for certain things.
I agree. And I think there's a checkbox mentality that you never want to get into, right? You're not just there to check boxes and say, well, we talked about these things. You're there to make a difference. You're there to make something happen. And so you have to find this is kind of a tools thing, but like you got to find the tools that are going to let you do that. And so much of it comes down to energy. It's hard to iterate if everything is really hard to do, and so always keep that in mind when you're choosing, which is like, hey, let's try this. Worst case scenario, we try it for a couple meetings. If it doesn't work, we can move on. If it's very complicated to institute, man, you're going to feel like sunk cost. And it's like, wow, we just spent days putting this together. We can't just get rid of it after 2 meetings. So it's a balance for sure.
Yeah. And I appreciate, I more than anything, I guess I appreciate that mentality of exploration, that we're going to try it, we're going to experiment, we're going to see, if this makes us better. And I appreciate that. I think that's pretty wise. So Boardable is a platform that that we can engage with, whether we're doing meetings IRL or we're working remotely. There are a lot of tech tools now for our sector that have brilliantly come along.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that the nonprofit sector is not always the quickest to adopt to
Sure.
tech,
That's
for
true.
a lot of reasons. But what are you seeing when it comes to best practices? And I ask this question with a framework of, if you will, ageism, because we have a lot of board members that skew to an older demographic.
Sure.
Who have maybe spent 30, 40 years of board service and it's always been done a certain way. Now we have these tech gates that are opening. And kind of like, what are you seeing with that bigger picture, and what should we be thinking about?
Yeah, so I had a couple things in mind when we were thinking about this topic. I'm going to flip them around to answer that because I think that's very real. I think this there's a stereotype, earned or not, that is, hey, how do I tech for nonprofits is going to, especially boards, you need a different approach than you would need if you were launching a consumer app on the iTunes store, right, tomorrow, right? Where you're like, hey, this is going to be my 10 and 9-year-old, they figure things out in 5 seconds that would take me a week. So let's start with, I think there's two really important things when you think about the tools that you're considering. First is setting a kind of a minimum expectation threshold. What do I expect the folks on my board, the members, to actually do, right? So if I say I'm setting this now, no matter what we decide we're going to use, we're not going to email these things back and forth anymore. It's insecure. I think it's a little bit risky. From now on, we're going to have one place, and I'm going to expect everybody in here to go to that place. Setting that expectations makes it, you can't have a list of 30 of them, but you can have a list of maybe 4 or 5 where you say, guys, this is really important that we do it this way. It lets people overcome a little bit of the change management issues, right? It's very, like, I've always just had it emailed to me. I've always had it delivered to me. It's always been paper. Like, what did a great job of forcing change management was the pandemic. It's like, we're not delivering you paper anymore. That might be dangerous. So we're going to send it, even if we send it to email. So find those things that really matter to you and then start from there. The second thing I would say is start small and grow, right? It's really easy to do. When you've picked your set, if you're saying, hey, we're not going to use email anymore, or I get much better attendance if I can make this a hybrid remote in-person meeting, you're going to have to figure out how to be able to log in. Now you can pick those tools and really dial in on the ones that matter the most. And then those other ones, because again, to your point, the audience is different, and you don't want to create a lot of pain for that audience to get the things that you really need. So set the expectations and start small. I'd say last tip with any of this is don't overestimate your ability to put a system of tools together. So if you're thinking about ideally how your board is going to run and how you're going to share documents and talk to each other and run meetings, if you've got 15 tools, even if you have somebody on your board who's very tech forward and says, hey, I can help set all this stuff up, every one of those is sort of a opportunity for chaos, right? Something to go wrong or get lost. And the amount of time goes up exponentially the more that you put in. So those 3 together kind of give you a very realistic blueprint for picking something that will cover your needs, allow you to set expectations, and you're not going to spend an arm and a leg, time or dollar wise, getting it in place. You can do it fairly quickly and not cheaply necessarily, but effort is so underrated. Like, effort is so expensive. Sometimes you really need to account for that's way too much effort to put 5 things off the shelf together to do what we need.
Yeah. So this is a tough question, but what should we be thinking about in terms of implementing this type of change? Is there a magic number? It's going to take you 3 meetings, 6 months, 6 years. I mean, what do you and your team at Boardable do when it comes? And I know that's a huge question. I realize that's a huge question, but realistically, what should we be thinking about because I think a lot of times with software, we feel like, okay, we're going to do it and it's going to be great. And we're going to start it on a Tuesday. And by next Wednesday, it'll all be done and good to go. And that's not the case.
There's that saying, right? It's like physician, know thyself, right? Well, board, know thyself. You have to really know what is is my board going to be, are they pretty tech savvy? Are they pretty, up on the latest and greatest? Are they bought in? Are they going to be excited about this? Or is it the opposite? And it's going to be, hey, I need to spend more time individually with each person. I really need to spend more time thinking about what I introduce to our board, right? Piece by piece, building to a crescendo as opposed to everything all at once. And I know this is like the world's worst answers when it has a lot of nuance to it, but the nuance is real. And we see boards that they're super motivated and they just come in and hit the ground running and they are off to the races. And we see the slow burn, right? We see hey, this is taking us a little longer. Maybe we come back and revisit their goals with them, or we come back and we talk about, hey, what are the things that are keeping you from being successful? And there's no shame in any of that. None. Like that is just who you are. And it just, eye on the prize, stick to your goals. Why did we start this journey? That's what you have to really keep track of. There is no set in stone number. I will say, if you feel like it's taking too long, it's always a great checkpoint to stop and just check it out. Like, hey, your gut will be a pretty good indicator of something isn't quite right. We're not quite getting there.
I've got to believe too, it's somewhat community forward. Like if you're in a community where, let's say, consent agendas are being used, or Boardable for, our platforms being used, then you're going to have, because board members generally don't just serve on one board.
Correct. You're
probably going to have folks that are like, hey, I've been trained up by this other group that I'm involved with. And then they start sharing this information. I've got to believe there's some sort of lemming concept here where we have groups that follow one another, and
that's very true. And we do see frequently Boardable customers are boards that have a member or an executive director or someone like that who has used Boardable elsewhere, right? And they can come in because they shortcut like the learnings. Learnings are a big part of this. And if you've done it once and you can come in and say, there's all these benefits that we can access here. It's nice to have somebody to lead you across, like, hey, this is the stream. Let me lead you across it. So yes, absolutely. That will happen. I think again, the more complicated the solution, the more leading has to be done. So you have to be careful, right? If somebody says, hey, I've done this, but we have to go get these 20 tools you're all going to have to learn, you might need to pump the brakes on that and say, let's start with a couple of them, because that might be our best bet.
So I think that's a lot of wisdom there. And for anything, I mean, my gosh, just implementing a new fintech system, same thing. You got to kind of navigate this in. So that leads us to our last conversation of the day. And we don't have a lot of time, but what are some of these common pitfalls to avoid? I mean, you said something brilliant about just overwhelming everybody in the system by trying to do too much at once.
Yep.
What are some other things that we should be thinking about?
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head. I think the number one is just overestimating your capacity for change management as a group. And it doesn't mean you can't pick a solution. Like you could pick Boardable. There's gradient about how much you want to do or how aggressive you want to be, how fast you want to go. And so setting expectations, you can't overestimate that, because that's real. Everybody's busy. We were talking about that. They have lives and you're asking a lot of them. And so you just have to really manage your expectations there. If somebody's expectations are way out of whack and I thought this would be 2 hours and it's 2 weeks or it's 2 months, that's where it starts to get really frustrating. I think trying to do it all alone is a pitfall. You'll see this where one person just takes on this sort of monumental task. And all of us who've ever tried to do a project, you want to bring people with you so they can have empathy and they can see the difficulty and they can help you come up with answers. And then they can also be champions for that, right? Like, hey, we looked at that. Here are the reasons why we did it this way. Don't just try and go into a room and figure it out, right? Engage your team, engage your board, engage your family if you need to, right? Like engage the people that can support you and help you, bounce things off of them. And then I would say one of the other pitfalls is trying to replicate what you do today and get the same goals. So, and what I mean by that is,
Oh, interesting.
it'd be hard to do really great record keeping if you're also doing a lot of like paper-based activities, right? Like that doesn't make sense, right? And so rather than meet, your board where they are, try and set some middle ground where it's like, hey, I'm trying to do these things. I'm trying to get us in this space. And here's why. I need you to meet me here rather than expect me to still hand deliver a board packet to you or call you to remind you that there's a meeting. I just need you to do these things. And the dialogue gets much more constructive. And so I think never try to replicate exactly what you're doing today and expect a different outcome, because that's pretty hard. It's a big ask.
It's so interesting. It just made me think years ago, I was working with a community government, and we were talking about agendas and how we could navigate their elected city council. And they were in a rural community. And one of the things that they started making changes, and it was the right thing to do. But they realized everybody was getting screwed up by their technology because it wasn't all the same. And so the county manager, the city manager went out and bought iPads for everybody. The exact same, he bought 12 or 13 and had them all delivered and did like a training so that everybody's technology was the same. And right. I thought that was genius. And it really did help. It was challenging for a lot of those folks, but it was a heck of a lot better than everybody working off of different systems.
They never probably would have been able to meet him or her where they wanted to be, right? It was never going to happen. So you had an impossibility versus something that had some difficulty, some challenge to it, right? Yeah. And so we actually see that with Boardable as well, where a board they'll purchase iPads for everyone and use the mobile app to use Boardable in a meeting or outside of meetings. And depending on your board, it can be a fantastic choice where, again, effort and time versus the dollars of those iPads. If you're doing the math correctly, it doesn't take very much effort and time multiplied across all of those people to make that work. And right. Suddenly you have a durable good that you can keep for new board members or spread around. So I think that's actually a really good idea in very specific circumstances.
Yeah. Very, very interesting. Well, I told you this would go by fast.
It did.
It has. You have been great. Cody Bender is my new best friend, as I like to say, because all things great and all things difficult start with the board meeting. Honest to goodness, I truly believe that. And so we've had Cody Bender on, Chief Product Officer of Boardable. You can go on to Boardable and really learn about their technology and their philosophy, the things that they recognize, work using their product or not. That's what's so great. They do a lot of thought leadership. You can go to boardable.com and learn more about this technology. I think it's just a win-win for everybody. It's still in its infancy, this concept, but also we've changed the way we're running our boards. We've changed the way we meet. We've changed our expectations. So it's I feel like you're in this dynamic moment, if you will, which is very exciting. It's got to be stressful, but it's got to be very, very exciting.
Yeah, it's very exciting. And it's the good kind of stress, right? You're making a difference, you're helping a lot of people. So that's a very gratifying aspect of it.
It's really cool. Well, it's been fabulous having you on. Who makes a difference every day in our lives are our presenting sponsors. They include Bloomerang, American Nonprofit Academy, Staffing Boutique, JMT Consulting, Interim Executives Academy, new name, same great folks over there at Third Sector Company, launching today with a new name and new brand after nearly 30 years in practice. Your Part-Time Controller and Fundraisers Friday. These are the folks that make a difference in so many lives, day in and day out. I mentioned this last week. We started our 6th year of broadcasting last week. We're marching upon 1,300 episodes. And most of these folks that you see here have been with us since the beginning. And so they're part of that journey with us. We, Cody, at the Nonprofit Show, end each and every episode with this mantra. And it means a lot of things to me, and it always changes. But today, the message I'm thinking about organizationally, and it goes like this: to stay well so you can do well. Thanks, everyone.